somewhere before.
How do you keep it? It's good to see you.
Just you're looking well after
Can I
that
come
walk
in
on the
for that?
beach.
We're walking. Can I come in?
Come on now, then. Come on now, then.
Today I am in the fishing village of Inver. A monastery was established here in the 6th century by Columkill and St. Noel. In Irish, Invernalia means the estuary of St. Noel. It is also believed that there was a settlement in Inver in that period, and indeed it is documented pre-plantation of Ulster was a fishing village in the Inver area. And on this beautiful sunny morning I am delighted to meet a man whose knowledge of the area and fishing is very well known. George Gallagher, thank you very much for inviting us to you and Bridget's beautiful home this morning. George, as we look out towards the Eagle's Nest, Benbulben, the Dartry Mountains, Donegal Bay, you must surely think you're living in heaven.
Yes, indeed. It's been heaven to us for the last 50 years. Well, all my life I was over in the village, and then I moved over here 50 years ago and settled here. But every time I look out the bay, I think of my grandfather and his crew that went out on a very good day and went down to near Rosnella, fishing herring, and a new yawl, good fit crew, hard working, the bread and butter of the several homes, and on their way back with a loaded boat that night, a sudden gale struck and the whole crew was drowned.
Yes.
Two of the crew, the skipper and owner of the boat, and one other member of the crew, made it on the upturned boat to the shores of St. John's Point. And in the morning after, in the search, both of them were found on the shore. And the shore was marked where they had moved around. So they made it on a cold December night on an upturned boat all night to the shore and died on the shore.
Yes. How many were actually drowned that night, George? Was it 7 people? 7 fishermen were drowned?
There were 7 fishermen. There was Peter Kennedy,
yeah,
and his son Pat, who was not a fisherman, but one of the regular crew took sick, and Peter took his son Pat with him that night to make up the crew. So his son Pat, Peter, the skipper, Pat, John Gallagher, James Donegan, Paddy Donegan, Charlie Keeney, Thomas Sweeney, and they were heading for home across Donegal Bay when the gale struck.
And I believe their funerals were heartbreaking. There was over 500 people attended the funerals, I believe, wailing and crying.
I have that.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. I think at the time it was the saddest thing that ever happened in this area. Peter's wife, my granny, that I knew very well and lived with her for a while as a young boy. She told to the day she died that the summer after the disaster, she was pregnant with her last child, and the child wasn't born till 8 months after the disaster. But in the June of that year, which had been 3 or 4 months pregnant, a local man took one of the crew, took one of her boys, John. He was only very young, out to do a bit of salmon fishing, to give him the earning of £1, I think that would be that. And she was watching from their house right over the bank when they got a big catch of salmon. And the nets were weak and they tried to float them into the boat, and the boat capsized. and the skipper, Johnny Tolan, was a very, very, very great seaman and great swimmer, and he put the crew on the upturned boat. And she ran from her house, a few months pregnant, to the port, over half a mile, to get help for to go out to the boat. And she said that took more out of her than the morning that her husband was carried in on a door into the house.
I believe the name of the boat was the Mary Star of the Sea.
Star of the Sea, yeah.
Mary Star of the Sea.
Yeah.
Yes.
As I say, it was a new boat, was only built in Greencastle. But as some old fishermen claim, what they would do, I suppose, after the disaster, said it wasn't a good seaboat.
Oh, right.
Now, a good seaboat has certain lines, you know, that can withstand a lot more sea than sometimes than maybe a bigger one.
Yes.
I had the experience myself. One time herring fishing. We had a 24-foot, what they called a 24-foot yawl, and we got a big catch of herring.
Yes.
Out in St John's Point, and we loaded the boat. But when you put a sail on it, it used to rise.
Yes.
You always, when it broke into the sea, it was very, very lofty. So we came in and we had someone similar left behind, and we got the use of a much, much bigger boat. And we went out and hauled the remainder of the gear. And I'm lucky to be here to tell the tale today, because we had a lot of trouble making it back.
Yes.
The boat, it was a term used, she was lazy. She's lazy and slow. When she fell into the sea, she was so slow coming back, she was taking water over her head.
Yeah.
And we were at her with 2 buckets from there to get in. But the quality of the boat was very important.
All right. I believe there's a type of draft net fishing for salmon here in mackerel and sprat. It's very unique to Inver. Can you tell us anything about that, George?
Well, it was one of the, it should have been recorded as one of the greatest skills, because for salmon and for mackerel, but salmon mainly, when you went out there, you sat with your boat looking out to sea close to the beach with an anchor out of it, with a slip knot on the anchor that you could quick get away. So it held the boat in position looking out to sea. And salmon heading for the river came into the fairly shallow water. Sometimes they missed the river. Maybe the tide was too low, they wouldn't get into the river. So they used to come close to the beach. And you took up a position there, 6 of a crew, and every man had his area to watch. You didn't watch the whole bay, you watched an area in front of you, off your oar. And a salmon jumped. They tended to jump. A salmon has to jump once a day anyway. I don't know if you know that or not, but because he's got a sail that he has to put air into. But they could jump many times. But when the salmon jumped, you always had to see the salmon out of the water to see what direction he was heading. And the skill they had then, they had to pay that net out. That the salmon would be swimming into the ring as you were making the ring. Now this was done with oars.
And there were 7 men to the boat every
There
boat.
were, well, not always 7. There'd be 6.
Okay.
And you were using 3 oars.
Right.
You used 2 on the back and 1 on the side you were coming round. A heavy oar in the on the one side
Right.
and two lighter rowers on the back side.
Yeah.
And the two heavier rowers kept turning around, and you came round and you caught the other end of the net, and then you started hauling.
Yeah.
And the way the net was designed was you had twice as much net as rope. So when you started hauling, the bottom came out and the net formed into a bag in the
Okay.
centre. And went.
Now I believe I know from recent times we had an exhibition in Donegal Town and Donegal Castle and Donegal Pier, and you were very prominent in that during the summer here of 2016. You're a good authority on the history of Donegal Bay and Inver Bay. I believe there were 330 boats at one stage trawling Donegal Bay and Inver Bay. Am I correct in saying that, George?
Well, it was a survey was carried out in 1844, and when the surveyor came to Donegal area, or came to the Inver area, there were 330 boats there. Now, they couldn't have 330 boats in Inver Bay, so it had to be Inver and Donegal Bay. And the likely fishing that they were doing at that time would have been herring fishing, gill net herring fishing, a fishing that was carried out all over the British Isles. It was one of the greatest methods of catching herring, and I think that would have been the reason for the 330 boats being there.
Now,
There were over 3,000 men.
Oh, that's a lot of fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3,000.
I have a model of one that was handed down, an old cobble that was designed from one of the old boats.
Yes.
I have it here. I'll show it to you later on.
Now, I know you're a very respected net maker, and you're very well known throughout the west of Ireland and the northwest of Ireland, as being a skilled net maker. Could you tell us something you say of your time with, was it gundries, or was it some of the swan gundries and killybegs?
I was reared with a net in my hand because when I started off, nets were very scarce, and there were very few net makers, and herring nets was one of the main ones. And you started fishing in April, May, and you fished salmon, you fished on, and you fished right into the winter. And come December, you would fish these gill net herring. You went out there in the evening. You had what was known as 5 or 6 sheets of nets, which were very, very hard to come by. And you went out with them, and coming on Duscus, you paid out one net. There were no fish finders. You went by the sign by the seagulls, and you picked out an area that the seagulls were operating in, and you paid out one net or part of a net, and it'd be still daylight, and you stayed with that net till the first star in the sky. When the first star in the sky come, you were likely to get herring started to move, and it was getting darker down there, so the herring meshed in the net.
Yes.
So you hauled that piece back,
Yes.
and then you paid out the whole thing and put an anchor each end.
Right. Now, were you a representative for the gundries at selling nets, or what was your role down there, George, in killybegs at any stage?
Well, if I could finish on that.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
On that, that was a herring net.
Okay.
And as I say, they were very hard to come by. When then coming up to Christmas, if there was no herring fishing, the nets were washed clean, and as I say, they were in 5 or 6 sections, which was one would be about 4 stone weight or 5 stone weight. And then on the winter nights, they had to be repaired. There were no lights in the garage, there was no heat in the garage. So the only heat was in the kitchen. And there was an oil lamp, and there was a croup, an extra croup.
Yeah.
And the bundle of nets was taken in, and it was about 20 to 25 yards deep, but it was only about 50 yards or 40 yards long each piece. So you took in the bundle of nets, you're away from the fire a wee bit, lowered the light down, and you opened up the net and you went through it, searching it for holes, and you mended the net there. At the same time you depart in the yarns and the crack that was going on.
Yes.
And that's how the nets were repaired.
Very good.
They're repaired ready for the coming season.
Right. Very good. Now, just to get back to my question a bit, did you actually, you worked in Killybegs, didn't you? Told me you worked in Killybegs in the net making industry.
Well, I worked for so long with 2.5 years with this net maker from Skagen in Denmark. IP Thompson was the name of the company I was looking for there. And that they came over with 2 boats and a trained net maker. And he was more than able to do his own work. And he took me in with him, then we started working for the Killybegs men as well. And well, it was 2.5 years with him.
That was in 1957.
That was in 1960.
1960.
1959, 1960, 61. And we were going very well till his love affair broke up, and he said he was good. The owner of the company died suddenly, but the government then, or BIM, gave him a job and me with him. But as I say, his love life didn't go well, and he decided to go back to Denmark. And I was left then on a free-wheel job. And Conrads came along then 2 years later. They had been coming to Ireland. They used to send over a guy, and he would go around the fishing ports, mainly salmon. And then they wanted to set up here in Ireland, so they came to Killybegs, and James MacLeod was building a small factory that he was going to for his retirement. And they came looking for a place. They didn't want MacLeod, and he didn't want them, so they amalgamated, and they left James the director and part owner or shareholder. And I had worked for him when I was working for the Dane, and he came in and offered me a job.
That's interesting.
So I went in there then, and they were getting the nets over from the parent company in England. And I started to sell them out and across the counter and so on. And I was there for a year on my own. And a manager was coming and going. So I thought there should have been more to it, and I went out, or asked permission to go out and have a look around the road, see what was happening. So I came back and I encouraged them to expand. In October 67 we took in three girders, 4 girders, 3 girders, 1 in the office, and we started off from there. Come salesman, come money collector, you name it, I done it. There were no computers, and we started to build, and it ended up, it was my life there then. I was there for 33 years. I travelled every nook and cranny in the country and out of the country, and the parent company went down in England and we came up. And I used to go then to Spain, Portugal and Denmark to fishing exhibitions, made it to Taiwan. finished up my inshore marine manager with them, and retired in 2001 with 125 people in the company.
My gosh, that's a great story.
So it was from a humble beginning.
It was, and indeed, I'm glad you mentioned James McLeod. He was he was a legend for the fishing industry in Killybegs, really, wasn't he?
I done a lovely bit of one myself.
Yes.
When he passed away.
Yes, I remember doing his obituary for I think it was a Democrat or something. Very nice man.
Yeah.
I met him several times.
He was a gentleman of gentlemen, and he was a qualified sea captain.
Yes.
When all the first bigger boats came to Killybegs, there were none of them had a license that could go into continental waters,
Yeah.
and James took home the boats for them.
Do you remember, George, any of the Zulu boats fishing out of Killybegs?
No.
I think it
No,
was
the
more or
Zulu-
less up Downings, was it, the fish? Or
Yeah, the Downings, but that would have been a similar type fishing to what we're talking about, the herring fishing, you know.
Yeah. Now, can we get to the port? The port is possibly about, a mile from here. It was once regarded as a prominent area for the fishing industry in the area, and indeed. And the efforts of I think it was the Nesbitts of Kilmacreddin were very prominent at that stage. And as you and I were talking earlier this morning, you told me that Tom Nesbitt, he invented the harpoon gun. In actual fact, I actually Googled it, and you're correct, he did invent the harpoon gun in 1760. And you tell me he's buried over in the old monastery grounds at the old abbey over there.
That's correct. That's where he's buried. I didn't know a lot about him, but the part of the story that I heard, that he went fishing. Well, he was a fisherman, but a whale upturned his boat.
Correct. Yes, I heard that
And
too.
the other members of the crew, I don't know what size of boat it was. The other members of the crew were drowned.
Yes.
And he was saved.
Yeah.
He lived down in a place called Kilmacreddin it was a beautiful 3-story house overlooking Inver Bay.
Oh yes, that's where the fishers used to live.
That was the fishers' home.
Yeah.
But they had fishers had the next owner, I think, had it tossed because it was high rated or something. It was very high rates on.
I think they were trying to establish a whaling industry for Inver, the Nesbitts in the late 1700s. And you know, it's a pity that he's buried over in the old abbey graveyard over there, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he's probably not recognised at all.
He's not recognised at all now. We had American visitors here.
Yes.
That wanted to find out where he was buried, and I didn't know at the time that he was buried over there. He said he was buried. So then I found out later on, and I know where the stone is.
Yeah, okay. Because the main road, you know, from the port came through this way into the port and then into Duncanelly. And you told me a very funny story recently about the tarring of the road from Inver to Duncanelly. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, it was a great wonder at the time.
Yeah.
Because there was no tarring. In fact, I looked last night for a little hammer, a round-headed hammer, that they used, and I remember it.
Yes.
Where they would get the council would get a heap of flags, and put them on the roadside, and the council workers went out, and with this little hammer, a napping hammer,
yes,
and broke the stones, into about 2-inch size.
Yes.
And that was the first 2-inch stuff that they got for the road.
And was there a poem connected with that? Do you know?
Well, there were a few words. It was a relation of Mr. Kennedy's here and a relation of mine that he was known as the Bard of Inver at one stage.
That must be where our cameraman takes it from. So.
Yeah. Well, it was something very unusual at the time. The tarn, like it was. I think the tar had to come from Scotland or England or something. Came by train anyway.
Right.
And then horse and cart hauled it along. It wasn't a very, I remember some of them. It wasn't very big, but and the tar came in great big blocks, big flat blocks, and it had to be broken up and then put into this tar, and there was a boiler in it, and there were a fireman. Well, the fireman followed, and there was a pump and all on it.
Yeah.
It was very, it worked very well.
Yeah.
But Peter Kennedy, as I say, is my uncle, and granduncle of somebody else's here. Peter, there was the local people were all working on it, and there was big talk at the time. And Peter said, from Moncharles to Duncanely, the distance isn't far. I came upon the workers and the working at the tar. The tar was cut by Kennedy, shoved in by Mr. Rose. My broken swept the heart of the road, and Sweetie worked the hose. Sure Hayes, sure he did work so hard, with a brush made of pure steel, and he had a helpful comrade, and his name was Tommy Free. And there is Hayes. Well, I'll get you on these later on.
All right.
That was Hayes.
Oh, that's Hayes, yeah.
That was Hayes.
Oh, very good.
But you're going to do photographs later on, so.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I was reading about they built in the 1800s, the 1900s. They built the row of houses over there, and then for where down the 2-story houses, was it? I think it was the 1900s anyway. But there were 12 2-story cottages built there, and then wasn't there? They're still standing to this day. There.
Yeah, they're 12. Yeah, my father was at the building of them.
Okay.
Yeah, he often said it was very hard work.
Yeah. So what is it, George, about Edinburgh that they seem to have tracked a lot of the big houses? You had, Bonnyglen, you had Drumbeg, and you had the old rectory all coming back to the fore, because as you know, Drumbeg it's been renovated at the moment, and the rectory has been renovated. I think Bonnyglen House was it was during the Civil War, 1923. I think the old IRA blew it up or set it on fire, didn't they?
The Bonnyglen House.
Yeah, Bonnyglen House, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was supposed to be. Now, see, they had between them and Drumbeg, they had control of the river as well,
Oh, right.
And they used to fish salmon up there.
Right.
And there was, often heard my father saying that the salmon were so plentiful, on it. And there was a problem then in the summertime of keeping them. That they built a nice house.
Okay.
Over behind Keelock School now, over there. I remember looking into part of it.
Yes, okay.
And there must have been winters must have been very, very heavy frost, because they broke the ice on the river in the winter time, and carted it to the ice house.
Good.
And stored it there to the summer.
Okay.
And then the salmon had to go away by train.
Yeah.
So then they iced the salmon and from the ice house.
Very good.
Lined it with hay or straw or something like that.
Yeah.
And it could keep for ages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that Drumbeg House, must have been because they had a lot of people working there, workmen in that area, hadn't they? You showed me a photograph there of Cranny Manor or Cranny House. There were something like 12 to 14 men working there.
Yeah, there were 12 to 14 men working there, surely. My uncle Willie used to work there.
Right. Is that Willie Kennedy, was it been?
That was Willie Kennedy, yeah.
And I do believe that it's a bit of news for the Inver area. The Drumbeg House has been renovated at the moment by a gentleman called Tom Martin, is that correct?
That's right. It'd be nice to see it renovated. But that one of the Cranny House, you see, Drumbeg was self-sufficient. They had everything. They had huge gardens and fruit and vegetables and all, and they kept a lot of cattle. See, all that land which I'll show you from outside all belonged to Drumbeg.
All right.
At one stage, and the cattle, the hay was stored on the barn lofts,
Right.
and the hay was stored on the barn lofts, and the workers went up, and the cattle were in underneath,
Yeah.
and they forked the hay down to the cattle.
Okay. And just before we pack it up, George, you told me a funny story before we started about a blacksmith who lived here, who they put a flag up across.
Yeah. My wife's grandfather,
Yeah.
he was a blacksmith for Drumbeg,
Yes.
and he didn't have his mobile phone with him. there was no mobile phones. So what they did was, from Cranny House to Mullins, they could see across the way.
Yeah.
So what they did was they put a pole up over at Cranny and put a flag on the pole, and any time they wanted Mick Mullen over, they put up the flag,
Yes.
and that's the way he knew he was needed. But at some particular time, he was called on so often that some of the workers says, "You'll kill Mullen over and back here so often." So when Peter Coyle was building his house over there, when he went in to check out the land registration, the land where he built his house on was known as the Kilmullen, and that's where it got its name.
Unfortunately, George, we have come to the end of our interview this morning, and thank you very, very much for allowing us into your house. Indeed, your wife Bridget just brought in some lovely tea and biscuits and buns there, so you surely are indeed a legend in Inverness, indeed the northwest and the west of Ireland, for your fishing skills. Your family, I believe you celebrated your 50th anniversary recently, was it?
Last year.
Last year.
Yeah.
And your family, how many of your family do you have, George? I know a few of the boys, Michael,
Six of
George,
the family.
6 of a family.
Yeah.
And do they all live locally, or are
They're all in Donegal.
they? Right.
They're all in Donegal. Michael's in Donegal, George is here,
Yeah.
John's in Ballyshannon, and one in Newton and one in Letterkenny.
So you're all fairly close to you.
And one in Killybegs.
Kelly Bags. So you're all close to you anyway.
Yeah, they're all close. We have 15 grandchildren.
Well, listen, it's a pleasure to talk to you, George. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
I just dropped in to see you all. I'd only stay a while. I want to hear how you're getting on. I want to see you smile. I'm happy to be back again and greet you one and all. For there's no place else on earth just like the homes of Donegal. By the door, the kettle boiling.